The security camera captured everything: the splash, the scream. And the moment Sarah Chen realized her perfect revenge had just become her worst nightmare. What started as a neighborhood feud over a backyard pool would spiral into a legal battle that exposed secrets, shattered reputations, and proved that sometimes the person you're trying to destroy is the one person you should have left alone. Because when you jump someone's fence to ruin their life, you better make sure they don't have 24-hour surveillance and a lawyer for a husband. The first thing people noticed about 1247 Maple Street was the pool, not the meticulously maintained Victorian house with its restored gingerbread trim, not the award-winning garden that had graced 3 consecutive issues of Better Homes and Gardens, but the stunning infinity pool that seemed to defy the modest lot size. Maya Rodriguez had designed it herself, spending 2 years of architectural school savings and countless weekends learning about filtration systems, pH balances, and pool maintenance. It's not showing off if you earned it, she'd told her husband David when he'd worried about neighborhood jealousy. That was 3 months ago, when they'd hosted the pool's inaugural party and half the street had shown up with congratulatory casseroles and genuine smiles. Now, as Maya stood at her kitchen window, watching her next-door neighbor Sarah Chen pace frantically along their shared fence line, she wondered if David had been right to worry. "She's out there again," Maya called to David, who was reviewing case files at their kitchen table. 20 years as a litigation attorney had taught him to recognize brewing trouble, and lately he'd been sensing it every time he looked toward the Chen property. David joined his wife at the window, his coffee mug steaming in the early morning air. Sarah was wearing her usual uniform designer athleisure that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, but today something was different. Her normally perfect blonde bob was disheveled, and she was talking rapidly into her phone, while jabbing her finger toward Maya's pool. "What do you think she's saying?" Maya asked, though part of her didn't want to know. "Nothing good," David replied, his lawyer instincts picking up on Sarah's aggressive body language. "Has she said anything directly to you about the pool?" Maya shook her head, but the tension in her shoulders said otherwise. There had been look-sharp, calculating glances over the fence, comments made just loud enough to overhear about property values and appropriate neighborhood standards. Most recently, there had been the HOA complaint about excessive noise filed the day after Maya's niece's birthday party. Despite the fact that they'd wrapped up by 8 p.m., "I don't understand what her problem is," Maya said, watching Sarah end her call and storm back toward her house. "We followed every city code, got all the permits, even moved the design 15 feet further from the property line than required." David set his mug down with more force than necessary. "It's not about codes or permits, Maya. It's about control." He was right, though Maya didn't want to admit it. Sarah Chen had ruled their quiet suburban street with an iron fist disguised as community involvement. She was the HOA president, the neighborhood watch coordinator, and the self-appointed guardian of property values. Her own house was a monument to control: every shrub precisely trimmed, every flower bed arranged with mathematical precision, every element designed to project success and authority. Maya's pool had disrupted that carefully, maintained hierarchy. The irony wasn't lost on Maya that Sarah's opposition came down to jealousy. The Chuns had serious money from Tom's tech consulting business and Sarah's family inheritance. Their house was easily worth twice what Maya and David had paid for theirs. But money couldn't buy the kind of architectural vision that had transformed Maya's modest backyard into something that looked like it belonged in a luxury resort. "I'm going to be late," David said, kissing Maya goodbye and grabbing his briefcase. "Try to stay away from the fence line today." "Okay." Let her cool down. But as David's car pulled out of the driveway, Maya saw Sarah emerge from her house again, this time carrying what looked like a measuring tape and a camera. The sick feeling in Maya's stomach intensified. Maya had taken the day off to catch up on freelance projects. The pool might have been paid for, but it had definitely stretched their budget. She settled into her home office, a converted bedroom that overlooked the backyard, and tried to focus on the marketing materials she was designing for a local restaurant. But every few minutes, she found herself glancing out the window. Sarah was documenting everything. She measured the distance between the pool and the property line twice. She took photos from multiple angles. She even climbed onto a stepladder to get shots over the fence. her movements sharp and deliberate. Maya's phone rang, making her jump. "Maya, darling, I hope I'm not interrupting." The voice belonged to Eleanor Hartwell, the 73-year-old widow who lived across the street and served as the neighborhood's unofficial information network. "Not at all, Eleanor. What's going on?" "Well, I couldn't help but notice all the activity over at the Chen house this morning. Sarah's been making quite the production of photographing your beautiful pool." Maya's grip tightened on the phone. "Oh, honey, the whole street's been watching. She's been at it for over an hour. Even had some man in a suit come by, looked official. They were pointing and measuring and having quite the heated discussion. A official-looking man." Maya's chest tightened. "Did you happen to see what kind of car he was driving? City vehicle, I think. White sedan with some kind of seal on the door?" Maya thanked Eleanor and hung up, her hands shaking slightly. A city inspector. Sarah had called a city inspector. She forced herself to focus on her work, reminding herself that they had nothing to hide. Every permit was filed correctly, every inspection had passed with flying colors. The pool had been installed by licensed professionals who'd dotted every I and crossed every T. But doubt gnawed at her anyway. Around noon, Maya decided to take a break and check the mail. As she walked down her front path, she noticed Sarah's car was unusual for a Wednesday. Since Sarah typically worked from home, the Chen house looked almost too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Maya was sorting through bills and catalogs. When she heard a splash from her backyard, that was too loud, too wrong to be from her automatic pool cleaner. She dropped the mail and ran around the side of the house, her heart hammering. The gate to her backyard was standing wide open, though she distinctly remembered latching it that morning. As she rounded the corner, she saw ripples spreading across the surface of her pool and something dark floating near the deep end. "What the hell?" Maya whispered, moving closer. It was a large garbage bag that had clearly been thrown into the water. Dark liquid was leaking from it, creating an oily slick that spread across the crystal-clear surface she'd worked so hard to maintain. Maya's first instinct was to fish it out, but something stopped her. The timing was too convenient. Sarah's morning reconnaissance mission, the city inspector, and now this felt orchestrated instead. Maya ran back into the house and grabbed her phone, her fingers fumbling as she tried to dial David's number. It went straight to voicemail. He was probably in court. "David, something's happened to the pool. Call me back immediately." Then she called the police. While she waited, Maya forced herself to document everything. She took photos of the open gate, the bag floating in the pool, the oily contamination spreading through the water. Her hands were steadier than she expected, years of architectural precision training kicking in even through her. Anger and confusion, the responding officer was professional, but clearly viewed the situation as minor. Property damage, rather than the violation it felt like, to Maya. Officer Patricia Valdez walked the perimeter, took notes, and bagged the garbage bag after Maya used the pool skimmer to retrieve it. "Any idea what's in here?" Officer Valdez asked, holding up the dripping bag. Maya shook her head. "I was afraid to look, but the smell, she didn't finish. The bag reeked of rotting fish and something else, something chemical and harsh. Made her eyes water. "We'll have it analyzed," the officer said. "Any idea who might have done this? Neighborhood disputes? Recent arguments?" Maya hesitated. Accusing Sarah outright felt like escalation, but the timing was impossible to ignore. "My next-door neighbor has been unhappy about the pool. She had a city inspector here this morning." Officer Valdez made a note. "We'll follow up with her. In the meantime, you might want to have the pool professionally cleaned before using it again." After the officer left, Maya sat on her back patio, staring at her contaminated pool. The water that had been crystal clear that morning now looked like an oil spill. The smell lingered despite the bag's removal, and she could see dark residue clinging to the pool's pristine white tiles. $3,000? That's what the pool cleaning company quoted her over the phone. They'd have to drain the entire pool, scrub every surface, replace the filters, and refill it. 3 days minimum, probably longer. When David finally called back, Maya was sitting in her car in the driveway, unable to stand looking at the mess anymore. "How bad is it?" he asked, after she'd explained everything. "Bad, David. I think Sarah did this." "Maya, be careful. That's a serious accusation. Who else would it be?" The T. Part 2. The UNR, the Riverside County. Jail wasn't designed for people like Sarah Chen as she sat in the holding cell at 6 a.m., still wearing her torn designer pajamas and smelling of pool chemicals. The reality of her situation began to sink in. The other women in the cell, a mix of DUI arrests and petty thieves, kept their distance. Perhaps sensing the barely contained rage radiating from the well-dressed blonde who clearly didn't belong, Sarah's one phone call had gone to her husband Tom, who'd answered with the groggy confusion of someone woken from deep sleep. "Sarah, where are you?" "Your side of the bed is, I'm in jail," she'd whispered into the grimy phone. "Tom, I need you to call Richardson and get me out of here." Now the silence on the other end stretched so long she thought the call had dropped. "Tom, what did you do, Sarah?" 3 hours later, Sarah's attorney, a sharp-dressed man named Richardson, who specialized in keeping wealthy clients out of serious troubles, at a cromp sent across from her in a cramped interview room that smelled of disinfectant and desperation. "Walk me through what happened," Richardson said, his pen poised over a legal pad. "And Sarah, I need the truth. All of it." Sarah straightened her shoulders, trying to reclaim some dignity despite her disheveled appearance. "It was a misunderstanding. I was trying to help Maya by cleaning debris from her pool area. I saw what looked like contamination and thought, Sarah." Richardson's voice cut through her practiced explanation. "They have you on high definition video, multiple angles, climbing the fence, dumping fish into the pool, pouring what appears to be muriatic acid on the decking. There's no interpretation of this footage that makes you look like a good Samaritan." The color drained from Sarah's face. She'd known about the cameras, had seen the installation crew just yesterday, but in her fury, she'd convinced herself she could avoid detection. "How bad is it?" she asked quietly. Richardson consulted his notes. Criminal trespass, vandalism, destruction of property, possibly assault if they claimed the chemical exposure created a health hazard. "We're looking at potential felony charges. Sarah, this isn't going away with community service, but I'm the victim here." Sarah's voice rose, causing the guard outside to glance through the window. "Do you know what that pool has done to our property values? The noise, the parties, the complete disregard for neighborhood standards. None of that justifies what you did," Richardson said firmly. "And frankly, your victim narrative is going to be a hard sell when the other side has footage of you committing crimes." "The other side?" Sarah's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, the other side?" Richardson's expression grew grim. "Sarah, Maya Rodriguez's husband, is David Rodriguez." That name meant nothing to Sarah for a moment, then recognition hit like cold water. David Rodriguez, the litigation attorney whose name appeared in the legal section of the newspaper with disturbing regularity. The man who'd successfully sued 3 separate HOEs for discriminatory practices, the lawyer who'd made headlines 2 years ago by winning a $2.3 million settlement against a developer for construction defects. "Oh God," Sarah whispered. "Oh, God is right," Richardson confirmed. "You didn't just vandalize some random neighbor's pool. Sarah, you committed multiple crimes against the property of one of the most skilled civil litigators in the county, a man who now has crystal clear evidence of your actions and a very personal motivation to destroy you in court." Sarah's bail was set at $15,000, manageable amount for someone with her resources, but the humiliation of the perp walk past news cameras had been devastating. By the time she arrived home, the story was already spreading through the neighborhoods. Social media groups like Wildfire.Tom was waiting in their living room, still in his pajamas, staring at his laptop screen with an expression Sarah had never seen before. "It's everywhere," he said without looking up. The Ring doorbell footage from the Hartwell house caught the police cars. Someone posted the arrest photos. The neighborhood Facebook group has 300 comments already. Sarah moved behind him to see the screen. The comments were brutal. "Always knew she was crazy, but this is next level, poor Maya. Her pool is gorgeous. No wonder Sarah was jealous. How embarrassing for Tom. Hope he dumps her. This is what happens when Karens go." "Too far, Tom," Sarah started, but he closed the laptop and stood up. "I'm going to stay at my brother's for a few days," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "I think we both need some space to process this. You're leaving me now." Tom turned to face her, and Sarah saw something in his expression that terrified her more than the jail cell had disappointment so profound it looked like grief. Sarah, I've watched you become someone I don't recognize over the past few months. The complaints, the measuring, the obsession with that pool. I thought it would pass. I thought you'd get used to it and move on. They're ruining our neighborhood. Sarah, you're ruining our marriage. He walked past her toward the stairs, then paused. Richardson called while you were being booked. David Rodriguez has already filed a civil suit. He's asking for damages, punitive awards, and legal fees. The pool cleaning company estimated $8,000 in damages, and that's before they assess the chemical damage to the decking. Sarah felt the floor shift beneath her feet. $8,000. That's just the beginning, Tom said. Richardson thinks they'll go after our homeowners insurance, and if that doesn't cover it, they'll come after our personal assets, our house, our savings, everything. But we have money. We can fight this. Tom's laugh was bitter. Sarah, you vandalized a lawyer's property while he was recording you. This isn't a fight, it's a public execution. And Richardson's fees alone are going to cost us more than that pool ever could have. After Tom left, Sarah found herself alone in a house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. She tried calling her sister in Portland, but the call went to voicemail. Her mother was in Europe on a cruise. Her few close friends had probably already seen the news. She poured herself a glass of wine. It was barely noon. But she'd been awake for 30 hours, and normal rules seemed suspended and walked to her bedroom window. From there, Maya stood nearby, documenting everything with her phone, while David took measurements and made notes. Moved with the calm efficiency of people who knew exactly what they were doing. As Sarah watched, a van pulled up with Channel 7 News emblazoned on the side. No, Sarah whispered, but she was powerless to stop what happened next. Maya walked confidently to the news crew, her hair perfectly styled despite the chaos, wearing a crisp white blouse that made her look professional and sympathetic. She gestured to the contaminated pool behind her as the reporter nodded sympathetically. Sarah couldn't hear the interview from her window, but she didn't need to. She could imagine Maya's calm, reasonable explanation of the events, the violation of privacy, the thousands of dollars in damage, the fear of what might have been in those chemicals. By evening, the story had been picked up by 3 local news stations and the county newspaper. Neighbor from hell, pool envy leads to felony charges. Read the headline in the Evening Tribune, complete with Sarah's mugshot and a photo of Maya's beautiful, now destroyed pool. Reporters wanting interviews. The HOA board demanding her resignation as president. Sarah let them all go to voicemail, but the call that came at 9 p.m. couldn't be ignored. It was from Richardson. Sarah, we need to talk about plea negotiations. Plea. Could fight this? Richardson's sigh was audible through the phone. That was before David Rodriguez filed a motion for expedited discovery and temporary restraining order. He's asking the court to prevent you from coming within 100 feet of his property pending the criminal trial. He can't do that. He can, and given the video evidence, he probably will. Sarah, this man is not playing games. He's treating this like a full-scale litigation war, and frankly, we're not equipped for that kind of battle. Sarah sank into her kitchen chair, staring out at Maya's house, where every light was on and people were coming and going. Contractors, investigators, what looked like insurance adjusters. What are you saying? I'm saying that David Rodriguez has already filed documents that suggest this wasn't an isolated incident. He's alleging a pattern of harassment going back months. The HOA complaints, the noise violations, witness statements from neighbors about your behavior. Sarah's blood turned to ice. What witnesses? Apparently, Eleanor Hartwell from across the street has been keeping detailed notes about your surveillance activities around the Rodriguez property. The mail carrier reported that you questioned him about packages being delivered there. And someone named Marcusa security technician has sworn statements about you watching him install the cameras from your window. Each revelation hit Sarah. Like a physical blow, she'd thought she was being discreet, but apparently everyone had been watching her watch Maya. Sarah, are you listening? She realized Richardson was still talking. I said David Rodriguez wants to meet tomorrow. His office. He says he has a proposal that might resolve this without going to trial. What kind of proposal? I don't know. But Sarah, I strongly advise you to consider whatever he offers, because if this goes to trial, with that video evidence and the witness datum, occupied the top floor of a gleaming glass building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the city. Sarah had driven past this building countless times over the years, never imagining she'd one day sit in its conference room as a defendant. Richardson had insisted on arriving 30 minutes early, using the time to coach Sarah on what not to say. "Let me do the talking," he'd repeated for the 10th time as they rode the elevator to the 15th floor. "David Rodriguez didn't get his reputation by being reasonable. He's going to try to intimidate you." But when Sarah walked into the conference room, she found something far more unsettling than intimidation: calm professionalism. David sat at the head of a polished mahogany table, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, his silver hair immaculate. He looked like exactly what he was, a man who held all the cards and knew it. Maya sat beside him, and Sarah felt a shock of recognition at how different she looked from the woman who'd once nervously asked to borrow a ladder. Gone was any trace of uncertainty. Maya wore a charcoal business suit that emphasized her architectural background, and she met Sarah's eyes with steady, unblinking assessment. "Mrs. Chen," David said, standing to shake Richardson's hand while pointedly ignoring Sarah, "thank you for coming." Two other people flanked the Rodriguez's, a pied woman in her 40s who introduced herself as the insurance investigator, and a younger man with a tablet who appeared to be documenting everything. "Before we begin," David said, settling back into his chair, "I want to make sure everyone understands the scope of what we're dealing with here." He touched his tablet, and the wall-mounted screen came to life with security footage. Sarah watched herself climb the fence in crystal-clear high definition, her movements captured from multiple angles. "This is from Tuesday night," David continued, his voice conversational. "But it's not the first incident." The screen changed to show Sarah measuring the distance between properties, then photographing the pool from various angles, then the earlier garbage bag incident. "We have 3 weeks of surveillance footage showing Mrs. Chen conducting what can only be described as reconnaissance activities around our property." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I was documenting potential code violations." Richardson's hand on her arm cut her off, but David smiled coldly. "Actually, Mrs. Chen, I'm glad you brought up code violations." He touched the tablet again, and the screen filled with official documents. "These are the inspection reports from the city. Not only did our pool pass all inspections with perfect scores, but the inspector noted that we exceeded all setback requirements by 15 feet. The insurance investigator leaned forward. "Mrs. Chen, did you file false reports with the city claiming code violations?" I, Sarah, looked desperately at Richardson, who was studying his notes with the intensity of someone trying to disappear. "We have email records." Maya spoke for the first time, her voice steady and controlled. "Sarah sent 14 separate complaints to the city, 3 to the county health department, and 5 to the HOA. Each one has been investigated and dismissed." David pulled out a thick folder. "We also have witness statements from neighbors documenting Mrs. Chen's escalating behavior." "Would you like me to read some excerpts?" Richardson finally spoke up. "David, we're here to discuss resolution, not to relitigate resolution." David's eyebrows rose. "Richard, your client committed multiple felonies while I recorded her. She caused over $12,000 in damage to my property. That's our updated estimate after discovering the acid damage to the pool decking. She's facing criminal charges that could result in jail time. What exactly do you think we're here to resolve?" The number hit Sarah like a physical blow. $12,000. That was more than her car was worth. "However," David continued, "my wife and I are reasonable people. We understand that sometimes good people make terrible decisions. We're prepared to offer Mrs. Chen a way out of this situation." Sarah felt a flutter of hope. Maybe this wouldn't be as bad as Richardson had warned. David slid a document across the table. "This is a settlement agreement. Mrs. Chen agrees to pay full restitution for damages $12,400. She agrees to a permanent restraining order preventing her from coming within 100 feet of our property. She resigns from all HOA positions immediately, and she provides a written apology that we're free to share with neighbors and local media." Sarah scanned the document, her hope evaporating. That's not reasonable. You want me to admit fault publicly?" "Resign from positions I was elected to." "You committed crimes on video," Maya said quietly. "This settlement keeps you out of prison." "Prison," Sarah laughed, but it sounded shrill even to her own ears, for a property dispute. The insurance investigator consulted her tablet. "Mrs. Chen, criminal trespass in the 2nd degree." Vandalism exceeding $1,000 and destruction of property are all felonies in this state. You're looking at potential sentences of 2 to 5 years on each count. Sarah felt the room spinning. I didn't know I never meant. What did you mean? Maya leaned forward, and for the first time, Sarah heard real emotion in her voice. What did you mean when you climbed my fence at 2 a.m.? When you dumped rotting fish in the pool where my nieces swim? When you poured acid on surfaces where people walk barefoot? I was trying to make a point about what Maya's voice rose slightly. About how you don't like that I have something nice? About how you think you get to decide what's appropriate for other people's property? Sarah looked around the table, desperately seeking an ally, but found only professional sympathy from Richardson and cold assessment from everyone else. Sarah, David's voice, was almost gentle. Help me understand something. Why the pool? What is it about a swimming pool that made you risk everything you've built in your life? The question hung in the air, and Sarah realized she didn't have an answer that wouldn't make her sound petty and jealous. It changed everything, she said finally. The neighborhood, the property values, the whole character of our street. How? Maya asked. How did a pool in my backyard change anything about your life? Sarah opened her mouth to explain about noise and parking and property values, but the words sounded hollow even to her. The truth was uglier and more personal than she wanted to admit. You didn't ask permission, Sarah said quietly. Permission? David's voice was sharp. From whom? From the neighborhood, from people who've lived here longer. You just decided to build this massive thing without considering how it would affect everyone else. Maya stared at her for a long moment. Sarah, I got every permit, passed every inspection, exceeded every setback requirement, and designed something beautiful that increases property values for the entire street. What exactly should I have asked permission for? You know what I mean? No, I really don't. Explain it to me. Sarah felt cornered, forced to articulate feelings she'd barely admitted to herself. You're new here. You've been on Maple Street for what, 3 years? Some of us have been maintaining this neighborhood's standards for decades. There's a way things are done, an understanding about what fits and what doesn't. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, David spoke. Mrs. Chen, are you saying that newer residents should seek approval from established neighbors before making improvements to their own property? I'm saying there's a community standard, a standard that you get to define and enforce. Sarah realized she was digging herself deeper, but couldn't seem to stop. Someone has to care about maintaining property values and neighborhood character by committing crimes against people who don't conform to your personal preferences. The insurance investigator was taking notes rapidly. Richardson looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Maya pulled out her phone and scrolled to a photo. Sarah, this is what you destroyed. She turned the screen toward Sarah, showing the pool in all its pristine glory, the infinity edge, the natural stone decking, the way the water reflected the sky like a mirror. It's beautiful, Maya continued. It's something I designed and saved for and built with my own hands. It brings joy to my family and friends. It increases the value of every house on our street, and you destroyed it because you don't think I deserve to have it. Sarah stared at the photo, and for the first time, she really saw what she'd done. Not property damage or criminal trespass, but the destruction of something beautiful that someone had poured their heart into creating. I didn't mean, she started, then stopped, because she had meant it. In that moment of rage at 2 a.m., she had absolutely meant to hurt Maya in the most devastating way possible. Mrs. Chen, David's voice brought her back to the present. You have a choice to make. Sign this settlement agreement, pay the restitution, and move forward with your life. Or roll the dice with a criminal trial where a jury will watch high-definition footage of you committing felonies while my wife testifies about the violation and fear your actions caused. Sarah looked at Richardson, who nodded grimly. Sarah, this is a generous offer given the circumstances. Generous? Sarah's voice cracked. $12,000, public humiliation, and a restraining order. The alternative, David said calmly, is criminal conviction, potential jail time, and a civil judgment that could include punitive damages. We're talking about the